As Tina mentioned, I did do a long walk, and I think most of you are aware of this already. At this stage in my life, I'm writing a book about the experience. The book is called Experiencing Freedom. Now, as you see, that's what I dedicated the walk to, was freedom. And the subtitle of the book is Lessons Learned Through 10 Million Steps. This is how many steps it takes to walk 8,000 kilometers, with my gait, that is. And the book is basically a chronology, for the most part, of what's going on in my outer world, what's going on inside. So I discuss topics, places, people I'm talking to, the natural wonder, the lakes, and so on. But it's also a commentary on what's going on inside me. And a lot of it has to do with freedom, because this is my favorite activism, has to do with freedom. And because I dedicated the walk to it, so much of what I thought about was related to freedom. And it's not a surprise to me, even though I didn't force the issue, that coming right down to freedom, it has a lot to do with being honest. Honesty with self in terms of freedom. And of course, the idea of self comes up a lot, because any introspection eventually seems to end up there. Now, I want to share something that took place it was actually June 11th, 2016, very similar to today, very similar date to today. I happened to be walking between Thunder Bay and Nipigon on the northwestern shore of Lake Superior. It was a fantastic day. It was one of those spectacular days, a bit of a cool west wind, and I was meeting lots of people. I happened to run into a trio who was from Ashland, Wisconsin, and they were running around Lake Superior. I met two guys from Noranda, Quebec, who had built this gadget about from here to Duane Long. It was a two-man tricycle that was aerodynamic. They could sit inside of it, and they were pedaling from Noranda to Vancouver. I met other cyclists. I had people stop beside the highway and give me granola bars and whatnot. I had just raised up spirits. I was feeling really good. And in those cases, very often I would break into my own thoughts deeply when I was going along, because the stress and turmoil of the walk wasn't as strong. And on this day, somebody had said in a podcast came back to me. It relates a bit to what Janice was saying. The guy's name is Stefan Molyneux. He's one of the biggest philosophy shows on the internet now. And he said something, and I'll read it directly. He said, false self is developed in childhood as a defense mechanism. And I began to think about what is the importance of that? And to me, so much of my walk was related to my pack, because it was just such a burden for so long after so many hours. And I realized that anything that we have built on top of ourselves is like a weight. So the pack was a weight, and then anything that I conceive of mentally as myself could be seen as a mental weight, I started to think. And I remembered that the process of the pack, after by then about 3,500 kilometers, was a process of culling what I had. I had started out on my way in Vancouver, when I got to Vancouver, Victoria, at a 40-pound pack. And by the time of this day on the 11th of June, I was down to a 25-pound pack. And I had lost some spare tire, and that wasn't included. But I realized I began to have this policy I called the no hitchhiker policy, which is that if something didn't serve me in the pack, it was either thrown out, given away, or mailed home. One of the three, it was gone. Through this process, I was able to get rid of things like extra water, extra food. I had a camping stove with a big bottle of fuel. I almost had the kitchen sink. I had several pots and pans, and they were eventually gone. I had a solar panel. I had paper books in my backpack when I started that I was going to read. And it was just extra weight, because I realized I could put that on my iPhone. And what I realized is that in this thought process is that I had a similar thing going on in my mind. I had mental baggage, which I had taken on and adopted as thinking I needed it. In the same way that when I set up my pack at 40 pounds, all those things I thought I needed them, but then I realized I didn't need them. And mentally, I had been told things like, I am a Catholic. I had been told things, I am a Canadian. I had been told, I am a taxpayer. I had been told all these things. And I remembered at one point the words of a very interesting guy. You might have heard of him. People refer to him as Guru Nanak. He's the guy who is reported to have started the Sikh religion. And one of the things he said, which people to this day argue over what he meant by it, he said, there is no Muslim, there is no Hindu, there is no Musalman, which is an older English way of saying Muslim. He was basically saying there's no Hindu and there's no Muslim. You gotta understand, where he grew up, it was in a war zone between the two, and he was telling them, guys, you're fighting over what you've conceived of, over your thoughts. Because what are all of these things but our mental fabrications? Man-made, human-made things. And I thought to myself, did somebody make me? Somebody made Canadian, somebody made taxpayer, somebody made Catholic, somebody made this, somebody made that. Am I that? I don't know for sure, but I realized that they are human inventions. And my thoughts began to metastasize into anything that I say behind I am is usually not me. I am this, I am that. And I realized that unless what I said could actually do something for me, it was dead weight, like the extra stuff in my backpack. And I might as well just forget about it. I began to realize that I had cloaked myself in all of these identities so that I could function in a society as a bit protected from everybody else. But you know what? On that June 11th out on the highway, I had nobody to prove anything to. It was like bare naked. I was on my own, basically. And furthermore, I realized that all of those identities, a bear in the wild wouldn't care about. If a bear came along and I said, I'm a Canadian, what does the bear care? Because the bear believes in truth. It's just meat, that's all he cares about. It doesn't matter about American, Canadian, who I am. Jew, Catholic, Muslim, what does he care? It's all fabrications. He's just looking at the truth, right? So at this point, my pack had been stripped down to the bare minimum. And so were my mental thoughts, my mental conception. So that I realized that the only essential left was what actions could be done. That's it, what actions could be done. The rest of it was just extra baggage. The lesson I learned from all this, folks, this very simple lesson that I learned, was that, Steve, it's okay to lay down your shield of childhood defense and take up your sword of action. Madam Toastmaster.